All right, we will transition over to the wide receiver rookie class. And folks who aren't been paying attention the last several months, this is probably one of the deepest wide receiver classes that we've seen come through the draft in several years. I mean, the wide receivers in fantasy football, standard PPR regardless, is super deep, and now we're adding multiple guys into this mix. So I think in general that brings all these guys down a little bit, just simply because the veteran guys and the guys that we know produce is so deep. But that being said, we saw it from Keenan Allen last year. We saw it from Tavon Austin towards the latter part of the season. Guys can have an impact going into their rookie season. So to launch this off, the first wide receiver off the board, nobody thought it would be anybody but Sammy Watkins. He came out the first round, pick 4, after the Browns traded down with the Buffalo Bills. They came up and grabbed him. They wanted this guy. They obviously need him in Buffalo. So Jim, from your vast viewing of college football, what do you see from Sammy Watkins out of Clemson with your Clemson Tiger there on your lap?
Yep, he's now the Clemson Tiger. Sammy Watkins, first of all, he's the wrong size. He's not that, he's missing a bunch of things that you just kind of expect out of a big wide receiver, especially out of wide receiver 1. What Sammy Watkins, though, has is speed. I mean, my God, this guy, when his acceleration, he hits like 0 to 20 on like his first step. It doesn't even make sense. When you see him, he catches the ball. He's kind of fearless. He'll cut across the middle, and as soon as he gets it, I mean, he's got one move and he's gone. Like, he sees daylight. We've seen him constantly break through there. So as far as he's the only guy that I really see as a true wide receiver 1 potential as a rookie, and I hate saying that. He's a low-end wide receiver 1, but I mean, if the guy doesn't hit 1,000 yards receiving, it's kind of like a bust almost for him. That's how much expectations are there, and quite frankly, deservedly. He's a hell of an athlete. I would prefer to draft him as a wide receiver 2. So, take that where you will. It depends on your league, PPR, non-PPR. This kid's going to be a superstar, though, and I think that's what we really need to focus on. So with that, guys, I'll turn it over to you. I know you guys are not as high as I am on him, but dude's a true talent. Can't mess with that.
Yeah, look, I think I was a little higher on Sammy Watkins before Buffalo went and traded Stevie Johnson. I think he's going to struggle. He's now the only decent wide receiver in Buffalo. He's going to see a shit ton of double teams, triple teams. So, if I took him, it would be very late in a keeper league, but I doubt I'll take him at all.
Yeah, I was higher on him before he went to the Bills. I mean, that's my big thing. I mean, the guy, I was hoping Cleveland would take him, and they clearly needed to because, Josh Gordon, I just saw him smoking a blunt walking down my sidewalk there. But they didn't. It was kind of weird. But so anyway, the Bills, they gave up a lot for him. They went up the draft to get him. They gave up a 2015 first-round pick for him. He's going to start. He's going to get a ton of volume. The problem is he's getting that volume from one E.J. Emanuel, and that's what concerns me. His targets will be high, but they're not going to be good targets. I think if they give him enough targets, obviously, if you give enough volume, you can be relevant. But I really was hoping he would go somewhere else from a fantasy perspective. And I think, Stevie Johnson leaving there, I think that probably hurts him. They have basically nobody else, so Sammy's going to see the number 1 corner every time they play. I think it's going to hurt him. So he's one of the more talented guys for sure, but because of the landing place that he finds himself, that knocked him down a little bit in my book. But he'll definitely be drafted in redraft leagues, and he's definitely the top dynasty wide receiver off the board for years to come.
He's never played in the cold.
Never played in the cold. Well, welcome to Buffalo.
Burr.
All right, so we're going to move along to one Mr. Mike Evans, wide receiver from A&M. This is who Mr. Johnny Football threw all his touchdowns to and just heave it up in the air, and this guy would come down with it. He went in the first round, pick 7 to Tampa Bay. Jimmer, I'm sure you saw a lot of Mike Evans. What do you think about his ability, first of all, his role at Tampa Bay with one Mr. Vincent Jackson, and possibly his dynasty value moving forward in coming years?
He's a big dude. Let's say that for starters. A lot of catches he made, a lot of big plays he made was basically Manziel scrambling and needed to find a target. If you're missing a 6'5" target, you got other problems. We'll get to Manziel later. But my point is that this kid, he knows how to get open. He's got some football skills in that sense. Honestly, I really don't know how he'll translate. I think he was so hyped up in his own mind and being in the Manziel world, the Manziel sideshow, if you will. I'll get into my comments about that later. But he's in a unique situation that I mean, yeah, he's a opposite Vincent Jackson. And I don't know what that'll really do for him. Quite frankly, I want to take a wait-and-see approach on him. I think at best he's a wide receiver 3. I mean, you might start him as a flex in some weeks, but I really don't think anyone should necessarily draft him. That's my opinion. I think he's a kind of wait-and-see because, again, that preseason camps and training camps, who knows? The guy might not even he might not have a relationship with Mike Glennon, another fellow redhead, you know? So I'll just leave it at that. So that's my take on him. I'm not very high on Mike Evans.
Yeah, there's a reason Jimmer is the draft expert and the rookie expert because I don't watch much college football, but I did take a little bit of time over the past few weeks to watch some Mike Evans highlights because there was rumor that he was possibly getting drafted by my Lions. So from what I saw, he's somewhat impressive. The one thing that really stood out to me is that the guy can catch. I mean, he does not drop balls very often. Good hands. So if that translated over to the NFL for him, I think he'll end up all right. Maybe not this year, but down the line for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see him as draftable. I think if he pops, you might get him off waivers for a week or two, but I think that you're going to see little streaky things from him and probably not worth being drafted. I mean, Josh McCown went over to Tampa Bay. For those of you who don't recall that, which he did pretty well in Chicago when he had his opportunity there. But, I think with Vincent Jackson there, I think that's good for Evans. I think it takes some pressure off him. He's not going to be seeing the top corner. He's not going to be getting double teamed. That'll open some things up for him. But I think at the end of the day, you're looking at a guy that might get, 45, 50 catches, something like that. So it's nobody that's super relevant to me, in a 10, 12-man league. So we're going to move along to Mr. Odell Beckham. Goes from LSU, drafted in the first round, pick 12, to the New York Giants to play with one Mr. I just threw an interception, Eli Manning. Just got sacked after my interception on the next very play. So, what do we think about Mr. Beckham? I mean, is he, Hakeem Nicks left the Giants. You still have, Ruben Randall there, who is, a guy going into, he's actually pretty high on my board this year as a guy who's going to break through. You still have Victor Cruz. So what do we think about his opportunity and his skill set, Jimmer?
Well, I think Odell Beckham is basically drafted on his talent. The dude's a beast. He could very easily slip into that number 2 position on the team as a wide receiver with Ruben Randall aging and just kind of that whole situation. I'm not a big fan of his. I think, again, he was picked based on talent, and they were hoping that they could use him as kind of some sort of modified slot position. He's not necessarily big by any means. Maybe he becomes another Tavon Austin where he has some great game, but that's really at best is all I see for him. I don't think you can really, unless he emerges out of, training camp and preseason as, Eli's new favorite target, I don't think he's draftable by any means. I think he's something to keep an eye on, especially for dynasty leagues, and I think that's something maybe to consider. But outside of that, you could probably pick him up off the waivers later on. And again, we're talking about two of the first 3 picks here that honestly they were picked up by their talent, not necessarily on the potential. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind for right now. So guys, thoughts on that?
Yeah, size-wise, I mean, he's comparable to Cecil Shorts. He's about 5'11". That's kind of small for today's NFL, prototypical wide receiver. But he's a great athlete. He's got great acceleration, good top-end speed. Apparently his hands are big for his size. That's always good. But, like I said, you have Victor Cruz there, Ruben Randall. But outside of that, you've got Gerald Jernigan for crying out loud. Like I said, Hakeem Nicks is gone. So this is a guy who might, in a PPR league, at the end of the season be somewhat relevant. But again, this isn't a guy that's worth drafting. It's just somebody that you would, maybe pick up on waivers for a bye week if you were to really flash. Well, let's move along to a guy that I am most excited about from a wide receiver perspective. Yes, he's a good wide receiver on his own right, but I think it's the fit which makes him very intriguing to me. This is Brandon Cooks, wide receiver from Oregon State. Jimmer, I know you hate those guys, but I also know you watched a lot of him throughout the years playing your team. He's going to the New Orleans Saints. Again, guys, a lot of this stuff is about opportunity and fit. He is going to the Saints with Drew Brees. Jimmy Graham, Colston are the two guys there. They lost Darren Sproles. They lost Lance Moore. So what do you think about his skill set and his potential for 2014?
First of all, yeah, I got to watch this guy firsthand on several occasions. Blistering speed. He is just super fast. He's a bit explosive. He's in the right place. He got drafted in the right place, right time. I think Drew Brees is going to capitalize on it. He easily goes into that number 2 position on their wide receiver list. And over there in the Saints, he's extremely draftable this year. I would consider him mid-rounder. Honestly, I don't see how he could slip much further than that. The guy can catch. He put up just back-breaking numbers here in Pac-12 on the West Coast. He's got a great opportunity all around. And honestly, Dynasty Leagues, this guy's definitely a high rounder for Dynasty Leagues. He's something to kind of keep an eye on. So that's my take on it. Jay, you got any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, really, what competition did he face? They played Oregon, really?
Best cornerback tandem in the country.
Just kidding, Jimmer. The guy is amazing, and making him even more amazing is Drew Brees throwing the guy. So I think he's going to be a wide receiver too, definitely this year as a rookie, as long as he doesn't fuck up too much and he works hard and learns the playbook.
Yeah, and I think I need to mention here, because last week, if you heard our show, we were actually talking about running backs, but I mentioned Kenny Stills as a sleeper for the Saints this year, just because of all the people that I said that they lost, Lance Moore, Sproles, and so forth. But I think this downgrades Kenny Stills a little bit about his potential upside, so I have concerns there. But I think, especially in a PPR, again, Drew Brees throwing in the ball, that's like going into a Denver Broncos type offense to where he's going to get a lot of looks. So, to me, I still wouldn't draft him in mid-rounds simply because, like I said at the beginning of the show, wide receiver is so deep with guys that produce. You've seen it year after year. That's the only reason. I think he's more of a late-round pick. And rookies, by in general, are risky to draft as it is. But I think he's one of the guys. He's, to me, the top wide receiver on the board from a 2014 perspective. And Jim, I just wanted to ask you, because of his size, he's under 5'10". He lacks that prototypical size. Do you see him as playing out of the slot, especially that now that Sproles is gone and took up a lot of that the last few years?
Yeah, they lined him up a lot of times as in a slot position, so he's not necessarily familiar with it, but I shouldn't say that. He's familiar with it, but that wasn't his natural role. In the position that he needed to play at Oregon State, he was actually just a true wide receiver. I think he will transition to more of a slot Wes Welker type position. So that's more of what I would expect from him in the pros. And because honestly, just get the ball in the kid's hands and he'll take it from there. Well, however, he can beat you deep on long patterns. So
running a 4-3-3, he can clearly beat people deep. But I think that's fantastic. I think if he becomes that slot position role for the Saints, I think that makes him even better from a draft perspective, especially in PPR. If he can catch those 5 to 7 yard passes and so forth and take it to the house, that's something great for fantasy. So we're going to move on to another guy that we're all pretty high on because A, he's literally a giant, and B, he is probably going to the best spot a wide receiver rookie could be going to, the Carolina Panthers, and that's Kelvin Benjamin. Coming from Florida State, so he's at a big school. We've seen him play good competition in top corners. He went in the first round at pick 28. You knew the Panthers were going to draft a wide receiver because they have no one, and I mean no one. They traded away Steve Smith. and Brandon LaFell. All that. I mean, they've got Ted Ginn left, for Pete's sake. They've got Kochery, Jason Avant, Taekwon Underwood. I mean, they've got nobody. We could literally try out and make the team and start in September. So they draft this big, monstrous man. So, Jimmer, what do you can tell us about Mr. Benjamin?
All right, well, first of all, last time this guy caught a touchdown was with 19 seconds left in the national championship game. Guy is a stud. He's huge. I mean, literally on the field, he has this presence in this domain where it's just like, hey, anything within 20 yards, this guy's catching. It doesn't matter how big or what size, he's going to go up against the Darrelle Revises of the NFL. He's going to outjump him. He's going to catch him above him. He's Megatron's size. However, that does not necessarily mean he is the next Megatron. Quite frankly, he's a little slow. He lacks some agility tests. He had a bunch of problems with routes. He basically, all the combine stats and numbers hated this guy. On paper, he looks like he's the next Megatron, but everywhere else, I mean, the numbers and everything else say he's not. So that's something you got to kind of keep an eye on. I don't know how well he's going to fit in there. I know this much, that Cam Newton generally needs to just kind of lob it up to people and throw it in their area because he's not exactly an accurate passer. He's an area passer. And if that's the case, those two could really make a good blend, and he would be something truly blessed to be in that situation. So with that, I mean, honestly, man, I'd put him right there. Late rounder. I think he's a late rounder for sure. So,
ET, phone home. So, I think, again, like I said, I think this is the best spot a rookie could have landed. Cam Newton, if you've watched him play as I have the last few years, yeah, you're right, Jim. I think his area passer is right on the money. And a lot of times when I've watched this guy, when Cam misses, he misses high. Well, it's damn near impossible to miss high with Benjamin. The guy's 6'5", he's huge, his wingspan, everything about it. He's slow. I mean, he's slower than probably a lot of tight ends out there. Actually, that's definitely not. But I think so. As far as red zone goes, I mean, this guy could catch 8 to 10 touchdowns this season. I don't know how many yards he's going to get in that offense, but he's walking in essentially as their kind of default wide receiver one. Again, because they have the worst, wide receiver backfield in the history of the NFL in all likelihood. So because of opportunity, I think he's going to be relevant and, again, probably a late round pick just because of how deep the wide receivers are. All right, so we're going to move on to Marquise Lee, wide receiver going to Jacksonville Jaguars from USC, second-round pick with pick 7. Justin Blackman, they're thinking will not return at all this season because he's smoking a doobie with Josh Gordon as we speak. Some liken him to some liken him to Victor Cruz. Jimmer, do you see any sort of similarities between the two in their skill set?
So here's the deal. Marquise Lee going into the season with pre-injuries, pre-quarterback situation, pre-coach issue. The guy was honestly locked for a top 10 pick, locked for probably a top 5 pick coming into this. He was the Sammy Watkins essentially. So that's something you got to kind of keep in mind is this guy has all the skill sets, all the intangibles, all of the abilities of Sammy Watkins. Now, you're looking at where he went, and he basically went for the cheap to Jacksonville, a couple around later. So he's something really special, and I think it really comes down to who's going to throw to him. So, I mean, we're going to talk about that in a second with Blake Bortles, but, I also want to tie in Marquise Lee because I think he's kind of in the same situation as Paul Richardson. Paul Richardson out of Colorado, he's going to the Sea Chickens, the Super Bowl champion Seahawks. God, that hurts saying that. Too soon. Both of them are small. Both of them are very dynamic. And, yes, they both kind of fit that Victor Cruz kind of model where they will just beat you deep. Maybe a Deshaun Jackson type. Either one of these guys can come out and be the next Chance Allen of the rookie class. I think Paul Richardson, though, the only thing that hurts him is in the offense that he's playing in. It's not necessarily pass happy. They still got Marshawn Lynch there, and they still got, the midget still running their offense. Guys, is that not nice to say by Russell Wilson? So anyways, my point is that both of these are kind of in the same shoes. Both of them know how to run routes. Both of them know how to blow by people. Both of them have the same agility. Both have great hands. Even though they knocked Marquise Lee for being a little bit dropsy on the balls this year, Go back to his freshman year. He didn't drop anything. He could throw anything within 20 yards of me, as small as he is, and he'd just run and go get it. Both of those guys, I think he should be able to pull off the waiver at some point. Both of them I see as kind of wide receiver 2, but they could be something special in the years to come. So that's kind of, kind of bundle those two together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's draftable. I think it's a good landing spot because Jacksonville essentially has no wide receivers to speak of, but the reality is, Chad Henne or Blake Bortles, the rookie, is going to be throwing him the ball, so he's completely untrustworthy, too risky to ever draft. Again, this is a waiver wire fodder type guy, in my opinion. So let's see. Jim, any other wide? Let's finish out the wide receiver segment just because we're Broncos homers, and talk about Cody Latimer. The Broncos actually went up the draft board, reached to get him. This guy comes from Indiana. We grabbed him in the second round, pick 24. We have a lot of weapons, obviously, already there in the most prolific offense of all time. Unfortunately, it didn't result us in a Super Bowl. But do you think, does he have any relevance at all? I mean, is this a guy, because we all believe that Wes Welker, he's probably as limited in his years in the future as Peyton Manning is. They're going to need someone to fill in the slot role. Maybe that will be with Emmanuel Sanders coming, and that maybe Latimer can fulfill the Eric Decker role, in 2 or 3 years from now. What do you think about his skills and his potential for 2014 and beyond?
Great skill set. Keep an eye on him. Not draftable. Might plug and play him for a week if we have catastrophic injuries in Denver, which I hate saying that. That's just kind of my opinion on that. He honestly is in a little bit worse of a situation than a guy like Devontae Adams out of Green Bay. They kind of got depleted a little bit in wide receivers, but they still have so many guys there. And Broncos brought in whatever his name is, Emmanuel Sanders, and so you kind of got to wonder, like, these guys are just there for essentially training practice. Eventually they could be plug-and-play guys. One other situation that we probably should talk about at some point is the Philly situation. Chip Kelly went after there, got 2 new receivers to play with. One, Jordan Matthews, intelligent kid, very intelligent, comes out of Vanderbilt. He could learn that offense very quickly and could be an instant impact player. But he also drafted Josh Huff up there in Philly, and Josh Huff was the guy that he recruited at Oregon, my boys. He actually went and got another 2 more Ducks, I believe, in the draft. So Chip's offense is going to produce, so there's something to kind of keep an eye out there during training camps and going into preseason football. So hopefully your draft is late enough where you can watch a few games and see what each of these teams got. So I think that kind of wraps it up, unless, Jay, you got any other thoughts on wide receivers?
No, I think that wraps up the Oregon Duck circle jerk.
Thank you.
Well, guys, right before we move on, Jim, again, just for the audience, just to sum things, summarize what we just talked about. As far as 2014 goes for redraft leagues, I think we all collectively, like Brandon Cook's potential the best because he's going to the Saints, finds himself, an opportunity there with Drew Brees. But from a dynasty perspective, Jimmer, which one of these guys, if you had to forecast their careers over the next 5 to 7 years, just strictly based on how good they are as a wide receiver, regardless of their current situation, how would you rank the top couple?
I think Paul Richardson's going to be something special.
Okay.
So, you can't say Kelvin Benjamin's not going to pan out, and you can't say Marquise Lee's not going to pan out, and you can't say Marquise Lee is going to pan out, but I think Paul Richardson's just something special. So.
All right, guys, well, that's going to wrap it up for our special NFL Draft recap show. On our next show, we'll be breaking down and tiering the top 25 fantasy wide receivers for 2014 and comparing our rankings to the current ADP of Fantasy Football Calculator. So go ahead and tune in to see how we're going to match up there. Again, as a reminder, we are live every 2 weeks in the off season. We'll be going to every week once we get closer to the start of the NFL season. So tune in this coming Friday, 2 weeks from now, May 23rd, for our next live hangout. In the meantime, download this show on iTunes, find us on Stitcher Radio, and check out our previous shows on the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and tweet us all your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. So for the Cushman and the Jimmer, I am Rob Smith, and remember, if you are taking a fantasy football off season, then you are already losing. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.